Okay, welcome everyone to, I guess we call these now X Spaces, but regardless, this is the weekly Rocket Pool community call. Usually on these calls, we have a guest along, and we also talk about recent protocol updates. So for this call, we're going to be focusing mostly on our guest, or I should say guests from SSV, a DVT protocol. Our previous biweekly update community call was on Friday, which is not too long ago. A lot happened in the Rocket Pool ecosystem, but over the weekend, perhaps not too much. So thankfully, we can really focus on this pretty important topic that applies to liquid staking. I will let our guest shortly explain more about DVT in general and SSV in particular. If you don't know who I am, though, my name's Mav. I do marketing and community for Rocket Pool. So DVT is a fairly technical topic. The concept itself might be relatively easy to understand, but if we're talking about things like implementation and risks, that can get a little bit more technical. So thankfully, we've got Langers along, Rocket Pool's GM, who can help out with some of these technical areas. If you have questions at any time, I will be keeping a lookout in the comments under this space. But of course, the Rocket Pool Discord trading, you can tag me in there with any questions and we'll address them as we go along. So let's start out with a quick introduction. We have Marco and Alan up here from SSV. Maybe just a little bit about yourselves, a short introduction, what is your role with SSV, and maybe a little bit about your background. Over to you guys.
Hi everyone, happy to be here. My name is Alan. I'm a co-founder at the core team for SSV. I've been in the space, in the crypto space for quite a while, since 2013. I'm a developer. This is how I started in this whole industry. And in the past few years, really focused on Ethereum staking and Ethereum in general, with all the transitions Ethereum has been going through, and obviously in specific distributed validated technology.
Hey everyone, I'm Marco. I'll give you a bit of my background. I've been in the ecosystem, in the Ethereum ecosystem since 2016. Basically, I was first I started organizing meetups, volunteering at DEF CON. My background, basically from before that, is finance and derivatives. So that's what I also focused when I got full-time into crypto. I was working on various liquid staking protocols, and then last year I was thinking what would be my biggest value add, how to push Ethereum staking forward, and that's where I contacted SSV, and I've been with SSV for a year. And basically what I do with SSV, I'm a dev evangelist and representing the DAO here. So basically, I'm working with grantees and SSV builders in the ecosystem, building the staking apps, also building developer resources, and doing some work on tokenomics and some analysis of the system. I also have some background in math and mechanism design. Yeah, and I'm also writing on the topic, so that's about me. Back to you guys.
Perfect, thank you. I do notice that there are a few new faces in the audience, so maybe Langers, if you could do a quick introduction about yourself. I've already mentioned you're the general manager, but a quick overview might be good.
Yep. Hello, everybody. So I'm Darren Langley. I'm known as Langers on Discord. As Maverick said, I am the general manager of the core team. So we're a pretty small core team, but then there's like obviously a massive kind of like DAO kind of behind it as well. But I kind of like as part of the core team, we kind of do research and development and kind of core development of the protocol. That's me.
Perfect, thanks. I think the first half of this call will be mostly over to the SSV guys. I'll let you, between the two of you, decide who wants to answer each question or talk about each topic as we go along. And then I think towards the end, maybe there'll be a bit more of a discussion and we can bring Langus back in. So let's start at the top then, very high level. We've been throwing around a couple of acronyms. One of them is DVT, and it's not what can happen to you if you're sitting for too long on a long plane ride. This DVT stands for something else, Distributed Validator Technology. So what exactly is DVT? And yeah, I think that's a good place to start out with. Marco or Elon, take it away.
Sure, I'll give it a go. So DVT stands for Distributed Validator Technology. It started out life really 3 or maybe even 4 years ago with the Ethereum Foundation, where the idea was, how do we enable taking an Ethereum validator, the 32th validator we all know, and being able to run it and operate it not just by one entity, but rather multiple entities that need to work together in order to operate that validator. And so it started out as a research by the Ethereum Foundation, from kind of everyone who kind of knows more about the development process behind Ethereum, the Bitcoin chain protocol. It was designed from the get-go to be multi-party computation friendly, which really gave way for DVT. And DVT really, at its heart, has two technologies that kind of married together. One is a consensus protocol, and another is threshold signatures. The idea is that you take an Ethereum validator, the private key for the Ethereum validator, and you split it up between independent or dependent parties, depending on how you set it up. And each party gets a shard or a share of the private key. And they need to work together through the consensus protocol and then sign together with some threshold in order to actually produce valid signatures for that validator. And they do so for every duty that validator has, attestations, proposals, seed committees, aggregations, whatever the duty might be. And the end result is really that you have a validator that transitions from being operated by a single entity, like it's mostly today, into a validator which is operated by a cluster, a group of operators that need to coordinate and work together in order to actually operate a validator. And in doing so, you really give the validator a lot more robustness. Obviously, you distribute control over the validator. You can really help with stuff like client diversity and geolocation diversity, regulatory diversity, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that if you do it on scale, you can really change how staking on Ethereum works, at least on the infrastructural level.
Good stuff. There's certainly a few words in there that we like to hear when it comes to diversity, decentralization, and obviously having its origins from the EF is a good sign too. Okay, so we've covered what DVT is, but SSV in particular, that's probably worth a quick introduction now. Is there any kind of special, anything in particular we need to know about SSV's approach to implementing DVT? And maybe a few more things about just how long you guys have been around for, how long you've been building here, and like what stage of the roadmap, as it were, were you up to?
Sure. So SSV really took the basic building block, which is the DVT cluster, that group of operators that need to work together to operate a validator, and we've built out a network out of it, with the idea that there's going to be a lot of different staking protocols and staking apps. Anything from decentralized protocol staking pools all the way to institutional staking, and obviously solo staking, and whatever is in between. But there's a common truth between all of them, which is somewhere that validator needs to run. And so the idea of building a DVT network is that developers and stakers coming in can use that network as infrastructure, as a ready-made infrastructure, and really start spinning out validators with little to no development. And I think that's an important kind of goal we had in mind for both enabling scaling of a lot of different types of staking applications, but also basing all of that on an infrastructure we think and believe that is better than what we have today. And so that's what SSV is really about. You can literally go to the web app and select your operators. There's a bunch of them running all the time, and with little to no coordination, start spinning your validators and doing so in a configurable way, exactly how you want them to run. And so that was kind of the idea, and we married that with a kind of a community-driven public good type of project. It's a DAO governed and controlled project where the end goal is that we understand, this technology is potentially going to be an important piece in the Ethereum puzzle. And so from the ground up, we felt it needs to be, on the one hand, obviously a good protocol and product to use, but also it needs to be a public good. It needs to be a free and open source project. It needs to be controlled by a big community and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of where SSV is. And maybe Marco can talk about where are we in our life cycle and kind of what we've been doing the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, maybe for people who are not so familiar with that, I would want to highlight why SSV or why the network aspect is important. Why a network? Why a DVT protocol needs a network? And there are huge benefits to that. First one is that in SSV, the clusters, the DVT clusters, are created dynamically. And they can be changed dynamically, destroyed dynamically. What it means for the users, if it's like a Rocket Pool node operators, if it's a Rocket Pool as a protocol or someone else, the creating of the cluster is really like you send a simple transaction and choose operators with specific IDs you want to have, and that's all basically. It works magically in this sense. Also, like you can change this cluster dynamically. You can decide, okay, like one of the operator is not performing, I'll change it for another one, or is in a bad jurisdiction, which has suddenly came up with something bad. So the bottom line, what I'm trying to say, this is like a huge thing on top of DVT, which makes the whole system and the protocol very easy to use from the staker's perspective. Also from the operator's perspective, because operators don't need to do anything; they just need to be performant, and the stakers can choose them without any cooperation with them. Basically, how the cooperation works, or how the synchronization between stakers and operators work, is just by set of smart contracts, by one smart contract. So there are no bottlenecks there. So I think that's something which is unique in itself, and it's also very good like for other protocols thinking about implementing DVT. That yes, this dynamic quality. What about the progress? I think actually I can talk for the ecosystem and for the DAO. Because I'm most involved with that. So we are currently working with more than 20 teams building different staking apps, which have different flavors, different type of LSDs, different type of just staking apps. So there is a large ecosystem there. So that's about the ecosystem. Maybe I think Alan, you would be a better one to talk about the trajectory.
Sure.
Because you've been there from the start, obviously, and maybe
Sure.
you guys can take it away.
So I've kind of hinted before that it all started from the Ethereum Foundation about 3.5 years, I think, ago. And so about 3 years ago, we kind of started working on a POC with the foundation. And from that moment on, it kind of evolved into its own project. we took about 2 years of development and development and obviously public testnets. I think we are now at our fourth testnet, going into the fifth, and so that's been a long development process. And 2 months ago, we started our mainnet rollout. We have four kind of similar to how Rocket Pool launched. We're doing it slow and want to be sure that everything works well. And so we have 4 cycles of mainnet mainnet launches or iterations. And so the first 2 are almost completed. By the end of the month, the second phase will be completed, and really going into kind of the main launch phase in a bit, where we start introducing the various developers coming in and launching their staking protocols and apps on SSV. And so, yeah, this is really kind of the mainnet year for us, or the mainnet few last months. Kind of a culmination of 2.5 years of development and testing. And yeah, that's kind of where things are at right now.
I think I picked up on something interesting there. Say if you were a node operator based in Europe somewhere, you're saying that there's, to a certain extent, some level of control that you could have when it comes to picking who else is in your cluster. So, for example, you could say, I want to help promote geographic diversity. I want to perhaps reduce some of the risk of having someone in the cluster who's maybe also based somewhere in Europe, maybe on the same power grid, using the same ISP. So you could select someone who's, for example, based in Japan. Is that correct?
Yeah. So as the user, really the one that has the validator, it might be a solo staker, a mini pool operator for Rocket Pool, or it could be also just a developer from any other protocol out there. You can configure how those clusters look and behave, and so you can say, okay, I want to maximize on client diversity, geographic diversity. I want to maximize on regulatory diversity, that is different regulatory territories. You can have other configurations you want to put in. You want to maybe maximize or minimize latency. You want to minimize your cost. You want to have bigger clusters, smaller clusters. Like there's a lot of configurations you can put into it, depending on your preference, depending on what you're building and operating, and just your kind of core principles by which you want to do Ethereum staking. You can choose institutional staking services that are the biggest in the world. You can choose solo stakers. You can mix and match, because ultimately they're all talking the same language, which is the SSV protocol. And so you can do that and kind of have an interesting type of configuration which suits you and your application.
Right, got it. So I think the benefits to a node operator are probably clear. I think it's kind of being mentioned both to you as an individual, but also to Ethereum's proof of stake system as a whole. And that obviously has flow-on effects to liquid stakers. Of course, at the end of the day, when you buy a liquid staking token like rETH, there's someone out there who is running a node to help to support that liquid staking token. And the more effectively that can be done, the more efficient and resilient your liquid staking token is. So potentially everyone wins. But obviously, I guess staking in general, proof of stake, is relatively new to Ethereum. And then if we talk about things like liquid staking, DVT, very much kind of new and emerging technology. And we should probably talk about potential risks, security, audits, the like. Whenever we bring guests onto any of these spaces, we talk about obviously people doing their own research. If someone was a bit curious about SSV, what you guys are building, and specifically around safety and security, what would you tell them, and where could they go to find out more?
There's a lot of documentation we've written and others written. There's a lot of guidelines and guides YouTube videos people posted. Marco posted a bunch of them as well. And and depending on your technical abilities, there's always looking at the actual code. The code is open source and it's there to everyone to look at. And so there's, again, depending on your appetite and technical abilities, there's a lot you can learn and kind of dive into. I think the biggest risk in terms of, in general, the biggest risk is always being a new technology, right? It's something that it's only now starting to become available on mainnet. And with everything new, it's that's the major risk factor there. And so, but obviously we've been developing it for quite a while, and it's been looked at by quite a lot of people. And so I am pretty confident in the work we've put in to make sure that it works well. But ultimately, it needs to, obviously meet reality and be used by real people in the real world. And so that's where I think the confidence will come from people. The more it's going to be used, and the more it's going to be, just put to the test.
Yeah, what I wanted to add maybe there is that when you compare the SSV node, which is a DVT node, the risk is, from some perspective, like the main risk, the risk of slashing is much lower, since basically normally if you're running a validator client and the validator client has a bug and it messes up, it can double sign or cause some kind of a slashing event. That's basically the worst case that we are afraid of. There is also, like, you can go offline for some time. There is that, but it's mainly the main problem is getting slashed. And with DVT is like the main thing that your client would screw up. It's not such a big deal. Since you don't really have the power to sign to like reproduce the full signature. Like the signature on the validator UT is always something that the whole cluster needs to come to consensus on. But as Alan said, it's a new tech, so I think the worst possible thing could be if somehow the key got leaked, but still it's not a full key, it's still just a partial key, partial validator key. So that's how I think about it.
Okay, cool. I want to bring up something in particular, jump forwards a little bit to a discussion that happened on the Rocket Pool DAO governance forum. Just to bring it up now, and if anyone wants to follow along, give them a little bit of time to load up and find the thread. It was a dozen or so comments between SSV and then some of the Rocket Pool DAO members. If you're wanting to find it, it was back on the 24th of May, DAO.rocketpool.net. Under Node Operator Experience, Exploration of Synergies between SSV and Rocket Pool. I think that was you posted that, Marco. So there was some discussion in there about some of the topics we're going to get into now. And one of them is the Sybil problem. So maybe this is a good opportunity, Laners, if you want to jump in here. Obviously, having seen Rocket Pool grow from day zero to now at the point where there are thousands of node operators spread all around the world, for Rocket Pool, there's some understanding of who these node operators are, not things like necessarily their name, but for example, where they might be located, what kind of clients they're running. But at the end of the day, it's still possible to be quite anonymous when you're running a Rocket Pool, when you're running mini pools via Rocket Pool. So one of the considerations that Rocket Pool has is a protocol, and I think the wider Ethereum staking community is around what the Sybil problem is, how do we avoid it, and kind of risks associated with DBT. So would you mind giving us a brief overview of that, please, Langus?
Yes, sure. So actually, if you read through the DAO forum post that Marco put up, and thank you very much, Marco, for putting that together. That was really good, and it kind of like broke down kind of like the opportunities that we could do. But it's quite a exploratory kind of which is the meaning of the of the title of the thing. But it was quite exploratory in the sense that the community and the community is kind of like finding out about the implementation of SSV's DVT and trying to figure out what the best kind of goal is, I guess, because there's lots of different goals. I mean, that's one of the awesome things about DVT is there's actually a lot of different goals that you could in theory use it for. Now in practice we have to kind of the devil is in the detail a little bit, but there's a few things that we that have kind of been highlighted as things to do. And so maybe what we could do is I can kind of like list those, and then we can kind of work through kind of what we think it would be actually really suited for. So things like the resiliency and performance of the Rocket Pool node operators, that's kind of one thing at kind of a node level. That's definitely something that is kind of important to Rocket Pool. There's kind of potentially lowering the bonding amount, and when you read through the thing, you kind of realize that might not be the case in this sense, but that's one thing that is kind of said or brought up when DVT is kind of mentioned. There's also kind of like this kind of squad, like teamed kind of validators. So a bunch of people who know each other and trust each other very well, working on kind of sharing the validator duties across a known set. And then there's kind of like Rocket Pool operators providing kind of validator services to the SSV network as kind of like a extra. They can get kind of extra rewards from that. So maybe we can kind of start there, and then I'll kind of discuss the Sybil stuff as it comes up. But maybe we can kind of like start there. I'll throw it back to Marco and Alon for that.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Marco, you want to take it again?
Yeah, maybe I can take the lowering the bond amount, and you can go from there. So I was thinking about the lowering or DVT. Actually, just for the background, I wanted to say I'm a big fan of what Rocket Pool is doing, and I have been a node operator for some time. Have been running on testnet a long time before that. So yeah, that's how I got to write the post. But back to the issues we were discussing. So lowering the bonding amount. So currently in Rocket Pool, you can run like 4 ETH. The mini pool, the collateral for the mini pool is 4 ETH plus 2.4 ETH in Rocket Pool terms, I believe. I'm not
8.
sure.
Is
it correct?
It's actually 8 plus 2.4 ETH of RPL.
8. Oh yeah, 8 and 16. Sorry.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. The thing is, yes, the Sybil problem is real. If people just would use, or if you would not require any collateral at all, there could be Sybil attacks. I think it's much better with DVT, and with DVT which can recover from some parts of the cluster getting compromised. But nonetheless, there is no reason why not to use collateral in the same way that Rocket Pool is using it now. So right now it's, let's say for the sake of simplicity, it's just 8 ETH. We can have a cluster, let's say a cluster of 7 node operators, and everyone would just have a collateral of 1 ETH. So together, the question is, how much would it cost you to basically coerce or corrupt the cluster, the cost of corruption? Like if the mini pool is just one, it would be 8 ETH plus RPL. If it's a cluster and you basically want to overtake the cluster, you would need to have 5 out of these 7 key shares or key parts. That means that you would need to basically somehow coerce or take over five of the validators. So that's what I'm trying to say. And everybody has an ETH of a collateral on that validator, on that mini pool. So basically the cost of corruption there is 5 ETH, which is already like 1 ETH more than it is right now. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you would be able to, with running DVT, to do this and prevent like these Sybil cases with the same basically requirements for cluster corruption. Actually, that is not the case. Sorry, I meant 2 ETH, not 1 ETH, because I was counting with the node having 4 ETH. I'm not sure why. So in this case, if you want to get the same and little better security, you would need to use cluster of 7, and every basically operator would need to put up 2 ETH for that validator. So yeah, that's I think what's cool and what could be the benefit in that case. And I'll leave it to Alan to talk about the squad staking and about the extra rewards.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Marco was saying, it's the case of lowering the individual operators' collateral, but altogether they're actually posting a slightly larger collateral, and with the threshold, you still get more collateral than you have today. It's not totally solving the Sybil attack; it's just making it expensive, basically. I think that it's also important to know that people can use SSV to run mini pools, and even today, it doesn't really require any changes to Rocket Pool at all. Ultimately, there's a validator running, there's a private key that somebody generated, and that private key can be used for running a mini pool. And I think that's important because that's also the lowest hanging fruit. So I think that one of the things I'm most fascinated about in general, and in specific in the Rocket Pool protocol, is that I think Rocket Pool really solved the economics behind decentralization. The problem is that there's still a lot of very rich people that we call whales in this industry, and they can run many mini pools. And so although they're posting collateral, there's still the risk of one of them being malicious or just being hacked and so on. And so I think by even without changing anything in the Rocket Pool protocol, even if we just educate people that that risk is it's there, and there's a technology that you can mitigate that risk with. If those whales running hundreds of mini pools can run them together in a cluster with others, that's going to lower significantly that risk of very big whales running a lot of validators being hacked or acting malicious. And I think that's a huge step forward. I think that even without doing any drastic changes to Rocket Pool and other protocols, you can still get major benefits from SSV. If you go to other protocols that don't necessarily use that collateral per validator type of economics that Rocket Pool are using, and maybe they're doing something a bit more centralized and so on. Even by changing that infrastructural component, I think there's going to be a lot of benefits in terms of the systemic risk on Ethereum. If we can lower the centralization on the individual validator, that is, who control the validators, if we can lower that risk, that is, less entities controlling many validators and morphing that into many entities controlling many validators, That's kind of the DVT network hypothesis. I think that's going to have a tremendous effect on the systemic risk on Ethereum and in general, also on the robustness and just the liveness of the network, because then, if one of those major operators gets taking offline and so on, it doesn't really hurt Ethereum because others can compensate for it. And so I think that's for me really the first steps in employing DVT technology in Rocket Pool and others, and that doesn't really require any changes to any of the protocols. And I think it's still a major step forward. I think later stages, as things progress, I think that we can get to a point where we can maybe start tackling Sybil attacks. There are ways to do that. They are just more complex, and we can change also economics around collateral and so on. But I think is a bit more advanced than where we at right now. I think right now I would love to see just breaking those really big, in Rocket Pool's case, really big mini pool operators. But also if you look at the greater Ethereum ecosystem, breaking down those really big staking services that managing tens of thousands of validators. If we can get them to run in a cluster with other operators, spreading the risk, eliminating single points of failure, I think in of itself, that's a major step forward in kind of, the ethos and kind of the vision of Ethereum.
Yeah, I think. Okay.
I just wanted to touch on the squad staking that you talked about, and basically that's technically, if you are technically capable, you can do it now already, like with a Rocket Pool, combining it with SSV. If you have 3 other friends, that's like the lowest cluster that you can run. So you and 3 of your friends can already run a Rocket Pool validator. So each one of you needs to just put up one quarter of the collateral. So I think that's super cool. And on top of that, like you can be picked by other services or other friends or whoever else in the network if you are a public operator, and also earn additional income, which I think could be, it's very cool. Take it away.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. So definitely that kind of like resilience and performance piece is definitely very interesting because, as you said, I mean, it would allow our node operators to do is choose to see whether they want to deploy this technology to make their node operation much more resilient. Now whether that's kind of just spreading it across their own nodes, but it makes more sense in a DVT sense to put it across different known individuals. So that's definitely something that that works well. I think the thing that people I think the community are a little bit worried about in the permissionless context, and the only reason we kind of raise this quite a bit is because Rocket Pool is permissionless by default. You can certainly do the squad staking on top, and as you said, you can do that today, which is fantastic. And I think we should probably develop a bit more support for that. But in terms of like the permissionless stuff, it does get a bit tricky, and we've kind of mentioned like the Sybil resistance. It's more around, or some of it is around, or the worry of. So when you take control over a validator, basically, you can then kind of slash it. And it's the thing there is it's not just your ETH then, it's yours and somebody else's. Now there was one thing about exits, which I think we clarified quite a bit in the post itself, but it'd be good to kind of like touch on that as well if you can. But like I think one of the things that the community worried about was exits as well. or kind of like holding the funds hostage. That was a kind of another kind of like Sybil attack that could be possible with the permissionless setup. I think withdrawals are definitely definitely something that we need to be mindful of, but it depends on. I think you kind of clarified some of that, and I don't think that's as necessarily as a problem as what we thought.
Yeah, I think that there's a bunch of different solutions for exits. Ultimately, I think the goal is, and I think it's probably a common thinking right about now, is that exits should be done via the withdrawal credentials, or basically a way to do that via a contract call. That's the end goal that Ethereum I think has for itself, and I'm fairly confident we'll see it in 2024. Hopefully, sooner the better. So that's where I would say the future lies in, and then it's a non-issue in any of the protocols, because if you control, if all of the funds and all the validators point to the same withdrawal contract, that contract can exit any validator in of itself. It doesn't need anything else. In today's setup, the exit message needs to be signed by the validator public key. And so there's a bunch of different solutions you can employ here. SSV will be supporting, hopefully soon, the ability to exit by basically a simple transaction to a contract. Once those operators see that a specific validator owner wants to exit, as long as you have 2/3 of them online, you can exit. There's edge cases where you've picked up more than 1/3 of the validators, which are of the operators, which are malicious, and then you get into tricky situations where you have more than 1/3 can act maliciously and create liveness issues, or even as you said, slash and so on and so forth. And so it's very important the way you pick up your operators. That's where the Sybil attacks also come into play. I think that in the near future, simpler configurations might do, or if you have pair operator collateral, you can slash that collateral if the operator misbehaves. There's other solutions which I like less, which is pre-signing exits and encrypting them and stuff like that. I less like it because it's a bit more complex. But all in all, I don't think it changes the problem necessarily. Even within the Rocket Pool protocol today, an operator can still say no to signing an exit. Obviously, they can lose their collateral. That's what keeps them straight and honest. And the same will work in any other setup with or without DVT. And so again, I think the setup or the way you configure your DVT right now, you need to consider those risk factors and choose your operators wisely. It might be operators you already know. It might be operators which are well known in the industry, well established with their name. It can be collateralized operators. Like there's various ways, but you still need to pick them carefully, obviously, because ultimately they each one of them has a share of the validator public key. Those are, again, it's a new technology, so people need to start kind of learning more about the risks. If for the veterans among us that do staking for 3 years now, a lot of those issues, obviously in different ways, we encountered in the first days of Ethereum staking. If you go back 3 years ago and start thinking about already all of a sudden having a different key that holds 32 ETH when in December 2020, and it was more than $100,000 in 2020 money, and withdrawal credential, which you probably need to change it a year after into an Ethereum address. Like there was a lot of complexity built into the Bitcoin chain when it's first launched. But ultimately, people learned how to use it, learned the risk factors, and I suspect the same will happen with DBT. We just need to understand those risk factors and work and configure our setups well. But nonetheless, I think if we do so, we can introduce a technology that will really help out with a lot of the ethos that Rocket Pool was built around, and the Bitcoin chain was built around, and obviously a lot of us want to see in the Ethereum ecosystem, which is robustness, decentralization, being tolerant for having built-in tolerance for different failures, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, what I just wanted to touch on, Darren, what you were talking about, the exits and what we already discussed on the forum, but it may be good for somebody, some of the people listening here. Basically, I'll try to stay on the ground. The use case we're talking about is you would be staking with your friends or with people you know, basically running your mini pools as you're running today, but you would distribute the key also to them, not the full key, but the partial key. That's the important thing. From this then goes, and that's like a misconception that sometimes pops up, that you don't really have the key, you don't really have the full key. And I just want to say, like, the thing that you are using DBT doesn't mean that you don't have the full validator key. You can, or you don't need to, depending on how you generated the key. But with this use case, if you use DBT with friends, but you are the owner of the mini pool of the validator, and something happens, you can basically, some of your friends go offline, or their hardware gets compromised or something. You still have the full key, but you are not using it for the validation. So it gives you the safety properties, because you will not double sign anything. You're just signing everything with the partial key. But if you need to exit the validator, you still have the full key in your cold storage, and you can still generate the exit credentials. Yeah, that's one thing. And you can also switch and change the validator cluster. So you can remove some of your friends who got compromised. You can remove Bob and replace him with Alice. So just to clarify that. Yeah, take it away, guys.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So yeah, it does seem to be kind of like geared up really well for that kind of like squad kind of like validator setup. I think as Alon touched on, there's definitely some exciting things coming down the Ethereum roadmap perspective that could potentially help DBT a lot. So that in Cancun or Dancun, whatever you want to call it, there's actually the exit not expiry kind of like EIP, which basically means an exit message doesn't expire. I'm not quite sure how you validate it, but I'm sure there's a way of validating it. That's quite interesting. Although you do need to then, as Alon kind of touched on, it's a bit more complicated because you have to like handle exit messages then. The Ethereum 1 address forced exits, that's really, really exciting. And that actually is being kind of like spec'd out at the moment. I think Danny Ryan's actually kind of like spec'ing that out at the moment. So yeah, hopefully we'll see that one come through because that really does add a great design surface for these sorts of things, and does actually kind of promote decentralized kind of permissionless staking very, very well. Yeah, so I think we've kind of like touched on quite a few things there. I think, what would you actually? I think Matt's usually answering the questions, but I can probably answer the questions. But like, what would you kind of like like to see from the Rocket Pool community? Kind of like going forward in terms of kind of adopting kind of SSV and DBT generally.
I think that for me, I would imagine just picking up one or maybe two of the most immediate use cases that Rocket Pool validators will actually want to see. I would suspect squad staking and maybe in general the idea that you can run serverless Rocket Pool mini pools, and just kind of understand how we can facilitate that the easiest we can. There was discussions, I think, around just adding that into the Rocket Pool CLI app, and other ways of configuring it. I think that will be a good first step. And in later stages, again, I think there's going to be a lot of evolution in the staking world. I think a lot of different protocols are now coming to grips with the idea that they need to be more permissionless and introduce permissionless operators into their protocols that will bring in, I think, a new industry or a bigger industry of collateralized operators. And with that, I think that if we can reach a big enough amount of those operators, I think we can also solve the Sybil attack issues, and that will open up other possibilities. But for now, yeah, just I think the squad staking and serverless mini pool use cases are probably the ones that people will gravitate the most to. And I think that will kind of open up the door for other use cases, and in general, just better understanding how Rocket Pool can utilize DBT.
Yeah, I second that. I think those are like the main two ones.
I think, Marco, you mentioned about like a working group. So if people are kind of like interested in kind of like joining the discussion but also kind of like, running like an SSV or within the SSV network, then maybe just kind of, I don't know, raise a hand or comment on the DAO forum or something like that. Would that be kind of the best way?
Yeah, that would be great. Also, I wanted to give shout out to Taiga from our ecosystem, who made like a guide. It's a hacky guide how to basically do the serverless Rocket Pool validator already. And yeah, basically about a working group, I think the forum could be a good place. Also, just yeah, like from what I basically gathered so far, I think ease of use, because like the Rocket Pool stack is super nice and good to use, well documented, and yeah, so Rocket Pool node operators like this level of basically user experience. So I think like to be able to somehow integrate it would be great. Regarding the working group, I'll think about what could be the best way to get involved. Yeah, but you can run SSV operator already.
Are you guys on Girly or?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
At least for the next few months until it's going to be hacked.
Yeah. Yeah. Before Holsky comes along and displaces it. Yeah. So that'd be awesome, because then it means that we can kind of like play around with it on one that isn't going to cost us any money. That's definitely it. So one of the things that we've done with the smart node stack, obviously it's open, it's kind of open source, but we've also started work on like an add-on, a way to kind of like have add-ons added to the smart node stack. I don't think it's not fully developed, but it's definitely something that we could probably utilize to get this in. So that might be one avenue to kind of do that. I think you kind of mentioned, Marco, in your chat around kind of grant and that sort of thing. Rocket Pool has grants as well, or grants and bounties. one thing that we could potentially do is kind of like come together to create a bounty that somebody would develop this add-on to Rocket Pool to make it a little bit more kind of integrated. So they're kind of our options in terms of how we kind of get the work done, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak for the for the DAO here. Obviously, DAO and the grants committee is deciding the grants, but I think I'm working them. I'm working with the grantees. I think this is something that I would definitely endorse, and I think it would have a support from our side, from the SSV DAO side. Yeah, if there would be some kind of a bounty, like a joint bounty, or there would be two parts of the solution, and yeah, I think that this could be a good cooperation.
I think we'll try and kind of like bring Joe into it a little bit as well, and actually, I think Joe was on. Is it Joe on the chat? Anyway, we can work on kind of bringing Joe in so he can kind of like provide some technical support into writing the bounty. But yeah, that might be a good idea. Yeah, cool. That's brilliant. So I think. Do you want to kind of have some wrap up questions or something, Mav, or do you want me to kind of continue on?
Feel free to continue. I think we've covered quite a lot and coming up to an hour now. So you can either carry on, or we can ask Marco and Elon if they have kind of any other final topics that we can discuss.
Yeah, I think we'll do that. Yes.
Yeah,
so
I actually have a question. I don't know if you guys have the answer to it. It has nothing to do with DVT, but how do you see account abstraction influencing or not Rocket Pool?
That's a really good question. It's not something that we've specifically kind of researched. Obviously, there's some interesting play on the node account itself. So there could be some interesting stuff around that. We're moving to more node level things anyway. So yeah, I'm not quite sure yet. Things like the only thing really I've been thinking about is the whole kind of like paymaster thing. So being able to stake and pay gas fees in a different currency and all of this sort of thing, or so those sorts of things we're kind of like thinking about, but we haven't thought about it deeply in terms of the protocol itself.
Got it. One of the aspects I've been kind of playing around with, and again, it's kind of a more of an open discussion, I would say, but paymaster or the idea that you can pay for gas fees with, let's say, with SSV or Rocket Pool or any other currency, that's super cool. But one of the other things is maybe the authentication itself, like the idea that you can create accounts which are, for example, institutional accounts, which are authenticated differently than current accounts, or use 2FA with Google or stuff like that, which I think that are interesting if you start scaling up the type of users that use the protocol, that you can offer stuff like that. But obviously, it's not tied into any particular protocol. Anyone can do that ultimately. But just loved your input on that. It's interesting to see how different protocols will start adopting that.
Yeah, the UX definitely needs to improve. I was kind of like bridging stuff across different networks today, and signing transactions and going through multi-sigs and all this sort of thing, and it was it's a lot better than it was in 2017. a lot better, but it's there's definitely still some work to be done. The whole passkey things and integrating that with account abstraction and kind of like built in. It's not even like a multi. It's essentially a multi-sig, but redundancy of keys and all that sort of thing. I think is essential. So yeah, I think it's really exciting. It would be great once once the account abstraction kind of really starts kicking in. At the moment, it's quite a little bit, well, it's abstract. It's and until it starts to really kind of get into those wallets.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I'm done. Yeah, I was thinking about things to talk about, but I think we've gone more than an hour. Maybe what I was thinking I could leave people with, guys, like if you want to get involved, try SSV or try to pair it with Rocket Pool. Reach out to me on Twitter. I've also done some tutorials, basically running both Rocket Pool node and SSV node. Yeah, so there are like many things how you can get started playing with SSV. So that's about it for me, guys.
All right, good stuff. Well, if we're kind of reaching the end, I don't think there's any questions that have come through from the community, but certainly, as I mentioned, we've covered a lot of interesting and quite technical topics. So if you want to know more about Rocket Pool or running a node through the protocol, the Discord is the best place to find out more. There's a great community over there, discord.gg/rocketpool. And then for SSV, maybe it's a good opportunity for you guys to mention your various your community hangs out and where people can stay up to date.
Thank you, everyone, for setting this up.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Let's saying that thank you for setting it up.
Yeah, and about how to reach us, basically I've told about myself, but I think if you want to know more about the project, the docs are a great place to start. So ssv.network and go to the doc section. And if you want to talk to me, the team, the other builders building, the Discord would be a great place to go. And I'm also maintaining like awesome SSV, a list of interesting things, interesting tools built on SSV, and also another repo where you can build your own liquid staking pool on SSV in like 40 minutes. So yeah, those are some of the places you can go to. And yeah, thanks guys for the opportunity, for the great discussion, and yeah, I hope we'll go forward and there will be something coming out of the discussion today.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for coming on and joining, and also thanks to Langers, of course. A couple of closing comments from me. We do have another Twitter space coming up towards the end of the week. The details are in the events section of Discord, and also it is not too long to go until we will be in Singapore. So if you're attending ETH Singapore, Token 2049, or Digital Asset Week, come and say hi. You probably will be able to spot Orange from quite far away. Thanks also to everyone in the audience who's tuned in, and we will catch you on the next space.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.